Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little, and I'm here today with the 16th episode of Weekly Poker Hand. And today I'm going to be going over a situation that comes up very often in poker tournaments when you have about 20 big blinds in late position and your opponents fold to you. So, in this hand, I have Ace-10 of hearts, and the action folds to me. And at this point, I have to decide what I want to do. I have a few options. I can either fold, which is way too tight. I can raise small, I can raise big, or I can just go all in. And so the first option, I think, is to just go all in. I see a lot of online players make this play because they know it is profitable. If you turn your hand face up and pretty much tell your opponents that you have Ace-10 of hearts, they're not going to be able to call with better hands than yours often enough to make shoving not profitable. So going all in probably will win money in the long run. Actually, it will win money in the long run. You could also raise large. This is what I see a lot of amateur players do. They raise huge thinking, okay, I'm going to make it big so that if my opponents re-raise me, I know what to do. I can easily fold them. The problem with making like 4 or 5 big blinds is that if your opponents do re-raise you, you're often getting very good pot odds such that you probably need to call off. So I think raising big is vastly inferior to any of the other options besides folding. So what are the differences between min raising or shoving? So I think that while shoving is profitable, I think min raising is going to be more profitable in the long run as long as you know how your opponents are playing. Quite often when you're playing on the internet, you can't get amazing reads on your opponents, but when you're playing live, it's not too hard to have some idea of what your opponents are likely to do. If you know a guy is crazy, you can min raise and then happily call off, because if you min raise, he's going to be shoving with 10-9 suited and whatnot, and you'll be able to get it in really good. Whereas if you just go all in, he's going to be folding all those hands. And if you know that your opponent is extraordinarily tight, that's another really good opportunity to min raise, because if you min raise and he goes all in, you can very easily fold, because then you're quite often going to be crushed against a very tight player. So, assuming you know anything about your opponents, I definitely think that you want to min raise. So I do min raise, and the player and the big blind calls. Flop comes 9-4-2, and he checks. So when my opponent checks, I have to decide if I want to bet or check behind. I am almost always going to be continuation betting in pots like this, because what happens is you can bet really small, probably around 200 into the 450 chip pots, and if your opponent does shove on you, you can easily fold. But notice that by putting in only 200 chips, you make your opponent put in his entire stack, or at least an amount equal to your stack. And by doing that, you're getting what's effectively a lot of leverage. You're putting in very little to have the potential to win a ton. I see what a lot of amateur players do in this spot is they figure out they should min raise pre-flop, but then they'll bet 400 on the flop or something like that. And that's usually not a very good idea, because if your opponent has something, he doesn't care how much you bet. He's going to put his stack in if he has probably ace-4 or better. He's just never folding those. So there's no point in betting large. A much better play is to bet small, and then if your opponent does shove, you can easily fold. If he happens to call, I would tend to assume he has something pretty good and not try to bluff him. But that's fine. Then you get to realize your equity and the pot's not gigantic. In these scenarios, you want to make it such that you can lose a few hands with your 20 big blind stack before you go broke. And I think that what shoving does, what raising big does, what those accomplish is you can only lose one hand. If you lose one hand, you're going broke. But whenever you min raise, you now all of a sudden allow yourself to lose 2 or 3 hands. Because notice, if I bet 200 on this flop, which I'm going to do, if I get raised, I'll still have 1,600 chips left, and I can do the same thing again in orbit later if I feel like it. And now all of a sudden I've lost 2 hands, where I probably started with the best hand, which is fine. But I'm not broke. I'm still in the tournament. I still have opportunities to grind out chips. So I do bet 200. This player shoves on me, then I just fold. And a lot of players are probably sitting here thinking, oh, you should have shoved pre-flopped, and the guy would have folded his 9-8 or whatever he had. But you're okay with your opponent playing those hands. Quite often it's going to come 10-9-3, and you're just going to stack the guy. Or it's going to come king 6-4, and he's going to check, you're going to bet, and he's going to fold. So don't look at the situation from the worst case scenario viewpoint. You need to be looking at it like what's going to happen on average. And usually what's going to happen is he did have 9-8. Usually your opponent's going to be calling with hands that are worse than yours. And if you can get your opponent to play out of position in hands that are worse than yours, in a spot where you can bet very small on the flop and often win it, that's going to work out really well for you in the long run. I recently made a training series where I thoroughly discuss this. It is my World Series of Poker coaching videos. And in these videos, I teach you basically everything I know to be successful at the World Series of Poker and also at all tournaments. There's over 10 hours of training videos included with this product. And you're going to learn how to play deep stacked, how to play short stacked, and also just general tips for success on how to think like a professional poker player in the tough world of the World Series of Poker. And I think that it is very important that you make a point to always actively learn. And if you find that you're only studying poker maybe 10 minutes per week, like you do with Weekly Poker Hand, that's not going to be enough. All of your opponents are studying that much or more. And I've worked hard to put up a lot of very good training content for you guys to check out at jonathanlittlepoker.com/videos. So you can go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/videos, check out the free previews to all the products, and there's a lot of free good content on the site. Also check out the blogs. And if you want a free video where I give away what I think is a very good amount of free content, just sign up for the email list. It's absolutely free, and I will send you that preview video. So check that out, jonathanlittlepoker.com/videos. And let me know what you think about this hand. I'm always interested in hearing how players play the short stack. And I think that a lot of players try to play it like a pure math game. And I don't think it's a pure math game. It's almost a pure math game, but there's still a little bit of wiggle room that gives good players a little bit of extra equity. And hopefully this has taught you, at least got you to start, at least I can't talk now. Hopefully this at least made you think a little bit about things you could do besides just open shoving or raising big and whatnot. Always think outside of the box and try to make good things happen. See what works and see what doesn't, and then improve your game. So thank you guys very much for watching. This has been Jonathan Little for Weekly Poker Hand.